All right, guys, welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and prediction for South Carolina versus Clemson. Major rivalry game going down in Week 14 of CFB. Both of these teams still have an outside shot at the college football playoffs, so this is certainly an important game going down in Clemson in Memorial Stadium at noon on ABC. 49.5 is the total. 2.5-point favorites are the Tigers. Getting things started with the South Carolina offense. This is a group that's really found its stride over the last 4 games of the year. You know, they beat Texas A&M and Missouri. Both of those teams were ranked. Both wins coming at home, of course, but you know, over the last 4, they've put up over 450 yards in each of those contests. So it's not just teeing off on Wofford. They did very good against respectable in-conference competition. And it really starts with Lenore Sellers playing much better football early on in the season. Wasn't all that great in terms of decision making and efficiency, but for the most part since then it's been great. This is a guy that's putting up some respectable numbers. He had 353 yards, 5 touchdowns against Missouri. Against A&M, he was obviously a phenomenal dual threat player. So as a passer, he's really starting to ascend. 3 straight games of 70% completion rating. You also look at what he's been able to accomplish on the ground: 489 yards and 5 touchdowns on top of 2,100 yards and 17 scores this year through the air. So Sellers, as a young quarterback, is really progressing well. Love the size, 6'3", 240. This is a guy that's pain to contain. That's why South Carolina's been so good on offense over the last couple of weeks. It's because of his progression, so that certainly is great. The weapons he has, though, certainly aren't the greatest. Joshua Simon, you want to monitor his availability. He was in a walking boot, didn't play against Wofford. It's certainly probably going to be a game-time decision for him. Leads the team in every single category, receiving at tight end, so certainly something that could be major for them. Mazio Bennett, freshman receiver, second, with 324 yards and 3 touchdowns. And after that, it's Raheem Sanders, the incredible talent Nick Harbor, who only has 19 receptions for 264 this year. And they're hoping to get Jared Brown back as well, a nice slot weapon who's really been banged up for most part of this season. He has 3 games of 45 plus yards. So when he's on the field, he's able to make things happen. That's 4 out of the 7 games he's played in this year. So that's an important player. They're probably going to get back here. Vadria vs. Jacobs as well. I mean, this is a receiving core that certainly I'd say is probably underperformed this year. Gage Lavardian, the transfer from Miami of Ohio, only has 213 yards on 17 grabs. There's guys that can certainly make waves here, but I think it's really just been a by-committee approach for this receiving group. And that's how it's going to have to be against another tough defense here. But Harbor, we've seen what he can do throughout the year. Whenever he does get touches, he makes the most out of them. It's going to be a big loss if Simon cannot play, because he really is their go-to target. And for Sellers, his continued progression is going to maybe come to a bit of a standstill here, maybe against a tough defense in a tough environment. He's had the privilege of playing at home for the most part over the last couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see what this receiving group can accomplish, because they're going to have some tough matchups, and they're going to have to win those. Evion Campbell, the last 2 weeks, has really become a big-time playmaker for them. This is a big play passing attack. Against Missouri, they had 4 plays of 30-plus yards passing. So even though in terms of, production from a single individual receiver, they don't really accomplish too much, it's collectively a strong group, and they're doing a great job of being able to spark big passing plays due to that threat that they have on the ground. It's really starting to phase opponents, and that's certainly something Clemson's going to have to be high aware of and alert, is not allowing big passing plays, down the seam, down the edges. So I don't think they're going to be threatened too hard, but this is a team that certainly has a lot of different variations of things to be able to spring these guys open. So it can be tough to contain the South Carolina offense, especially when they're calling plays to the tune that they are right now, and Sellers is able to put it on them. Back to the SC ground attack, read off Sellers' numbers. I mean, the QB run is obviously something that's a big part of this offense. Raheem Sanders this year, though, 821 and 11 touchdowns. He's been very impressive as a runner, very efficient guy. Has a couple of 100-yard games this season, 3 of them matter of fact. At times, though, he can kind of get stuck in the mud. Against Missouri, less than 3 yards per carry. Against Oklahoma, nothing was cooking. Same against Bama and Ole Miss. Even though he had a pretty solid game against Bama as the afternoon went on. Sanders, this guy is also kind of the heart and soul of the offense as a senior, a veteran player that's certainly going to have a big day if they want to compete with the Tigers' defense that's been shaky at times. This is a great 1-2 punch, though. Sanders and Sellers, a lot of size coming at you. So even if they're not always efficient, especially in the first half, the first 3 quarters, those body blows are eventually going to wear down their opponent. So I think that's the one thing that's certainly working in the favor of South Carolina. This is a team that's putting up 218.5 yards per game over the last 4 contests on average. So, they've really found their footing on the offensive side of the ball. Looking at the Gamecocks offensive line, this is a unit that's 124th in sacks allowed. They've also been much better as the season has went on, but in a tough matchup like this, how will they look? I thought against Texas A&M, a pretty comparable defensive line, they had no issues with them. They were able to put up a lot of balance in that game, 500 plus yards of offense. I'm pretty sure. In pass protection, probably not as great. But in terms of run blocking, they've been a very consistent unit, and that's certainly a very important part of this offense, is being able to get things going on the ground. Josiah Thompson at left tackle has really not been all that good for him. At left guard, Kamar Bell, and he's been better, but also not much. Vershawn Lee, a veteran, probably having his best career season. This is a guy that's also a bit of a, kind of struggled over the past couple of years. Has allowed plenty of sacks on the interior, but he's a more consistent player. Torres Eli Simpkins, he's probably their best player at right guard in pass protection. And Kason Henry, also a bit of a struggle point. I mean, these tackles are just not all that great. I think that's going to be a big problem going up against a team that has legit heat coming off of the edge. But the thing for South Carolina is they're able to grind down opponents, and they're able to wear them down with this rushing attack. So as long as they can stay out of those obvious passing situations, so those tackles can't get beat, and they can stay in third and shorts, this offense will be able to certainly move the ball. And if they can be efficient with 40, 50 plus rushing attempts, they're going to wear that pass rush down. So I think it's certainly a very important key again for this SC offense. This is a team that can accomplish good things despite some of the limitations on the O-line. I think that's what they've showcased this season. So great stuff from South Carolina. Very happy with the improvements. But if they're in obvious passing situations, it's going to be hard for them to move the football. They got to be able to run it here. The QB run is going to be important. They got to be effective on getting to the edge as well. That's going to be what the Gamecocks game plan is. We move to the Clemson offense. This is a group throughout the year just seemingly gets stuck in the mud in their own right. Seen it against Louisville. For the most part of that game, they couldn't really do much. Against Pittsburgh, they started hot but went cold in the second half before Klubnik ripped off a big run. That's really just been the case for this offense. They just can't, have established consistency against good opponents. Same thing happened against Virginia Tech, where they were good in spurts, but for the most part, it's kind of been a struggle. You'll start with Cade Klubnik. This guy's the heart and soul of this offense. His big playmaking has really bailed them out at times this year. 2,700 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, 375 and 5 rushing. So he's a nice dual-threat player. Saw what he did against Pitt in a game that they were probably about to lose, and he rips off a 50-yard rushing touchdown to win on the contest. Also at 288 passing in that one. He's putting up about 250 per game throwing the football. For Clemson, it just seems like play calling and overall just ability to be effective. It's bad balance for them. But I just think going up against a defensive line like the one South Carolina has, where they can be complete game wreckers, they got to be able to move us some tempo. And of course, they're going to have to be able to throw the football. Antonio Williams, he's going to be their best pass catcher here. Leads the team in all categories by a wide margin. 58 grabs, 689, 10 touchdowns, and he's really come on strong the past couple of weeks. Had a field day against Pitt. Had 2 scores against the Citadel as well this past weekend. This is a guy that's finally been fully healthy this year and is expected to really emerge as a high-end pass catcher. Jake Brinkstool at tight end was held out this past weekend against the FCS opponent. 5 touchdowns, 403 yards. He's a nice, reliable guy that can usually be found around the sticks for first downs. Red zone option as well. TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco, these 2 true freshmen, they've been impressive. 430-plus yards for each of them. Moore, he's a guy that's more of a big play pass catcher for them. He's done that periodically throughout the year. Wesco on 25 receptions. The last couple weeks has been able to string together a couple of 50-yard-plus games. So this is a group that's in much better balance than even it was a year or 2 ago. I think Troy Stiletto, he's also back and healthy as well. But those 4 guys are going to be the main ones that are going to be Cade Klubnik's options. And, they're going to have big plays. They're going to have to be able to make plays downfield and at the sticks against a very good defense, because it's going to certainly be hard to run the football. And that's where we move to Phil Maffa, who was 1,000 yards this year, 8 touchdowns. He's accustomed to facing physical defenses as a 230-pound guy. I mean, he brings a lot of heat to the table. Didn't see many touches this past weekend, so they're keeping him, nice and fresh for this major matchup. He's a workhorse at times. There's plenty of games where he gets 25-plus carries, 3 of them this year, but, last year he's seen him against Notre Dame at 36 carries. So they have no problem, going head-to-head and running straight at some of these tougher defenses. South Carolina, I don't think they've allowed 150 yards once this year in a game. So that's going to be certainly a challenge for Clemson, staying ahead of the sticks. I think it's going to be the most important part. You're not probably going to be able to win the game with your rushing attack. Jay Haynes burst out against the Citadel. 118-yard, 2 scores, so maybe they can look for him to provide some explosive plays. But it's really going to be the Maffa and Klubnik show. He's certainly going to see a lot of QB run as well. They just have to be efficient with those, and I think, again, staying ahead of the sticks is going to be the most important thing in this game for this offense. It allows them to get the ball out quickly on these shorter down and distances, because going downfield is certainly going to be a challenge with these receivers. I think they can make plays, 20-plus yards downfield, but will you have enough time to throw the football with a clean pocket? I think certainly is unlikely, especially with an offensive line that's certainly in flux. Tristan Lee and Marcus Tate starting left tackle and right guard respectively. These guys have been battling injuries, and that's not great for Clemson. These are guys they certainly need back for this football team. The offensive line, Marcus Tate's the starting left guard, that is. They need these guys back, though. They're probably their best 2 linemen for them, when they're not on the field. You've seen how bad they were against Pittsburgh. They weren't all that good against Virginia Tech either. Pass protection without some of these guys has been iffy, and even when they're on the field, it's not all that great. And offensive line is certainly one of the weaker areas for this football team. Ryan Lynchium at center, he's having an all right year. Harris Sewell, whenever he's on the field at right guard, not terrific. Walker Parks, he's had to kick out the right tackle, and then Blake Miller has had to shift all around this offensive line as well. So it's been, a troublesome unit just to begin with, and now with a slew of injuries, it's certainly going to be a big issue potentially for Clemson. So they're going to have to create ways to get Klubnik off the spot, rolling out. Of course, the run game, if they can establish that would be great as well. But the offensive line, you want to monitor injuries going into this contest, but the interior is probably going to be the weaker spot for them. Even though Tate, if he plays, that's a major get back for this unit. Clemson overall, it's an offense again that's just kind of seemingly doesn't have a great prowess. The balance is usually evident when they can get things going, but it's been trouble to establish any consistency. And the Klubnik is going to have to probably play superhero again to stay ahead of the sticks, and I think Clemson will do all right. Probably don't got to score too many points in this game to win it. Now we move to that South Carolina defensive line. It's probably the best in college football. Kyle Kennard, I thought this guy was a really good player for Georgia Tech last year. Comes over to South Carolina and just boosts his draft stock as much as you could. 15 tackles for loss, 11.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. This guy has a complete game wrecker in many ways. And then his true freshman counterpart, Dylan Stewart, has 9.5 TFL as well. The edge presence is phenomenal. He also has 6.5 sacks. They're very tough guys to slow down. And it's not any easier on the interior. You got veterans Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders, Alex Huntley. This is a phenomenal defensive line. Every way you look at it, that's the starting 4, and then Huntley, the 5th guy who'll get on the field. These guys are incredibly difficult to deal with because you got that pass rushing prowess on the edge and then those run-stopping threats on the interior. This is a very tough unit to crack. Nobody's been able to do it this year. They've faced some very tough opponents in conference. Again, nobody has had 150 yards rushing on them all year long. Texas A&M and Missouri both had 144 each. That's the most success you're looking at. And then Ole Miss had 140 as well. But it certainly took, a strong afternoon. It wasn't due to great efficiency either. So really more so volume. So I think that's Clemson's game plan. If they're going to run the ball, it's going to be a lot of volume. Staying ahead of the sticks, that's going to be important. But Clemson, their offensive line is tad iffy, and I think going up in a matchup like this certainly favors South Carolina, who's great at creating negative plays and really just bringing, pressure and forcing throwaways, incomplete passes, things of that nature. You look at the middle of their defense, Demetrius Knight. He's been a phenomenal addition from Charlotte. This guy's been a real leader for them with 65 tackles. Also has 7 TFL. Debo Williams, Bam Martin Scott, 2 more veteran linebackers. This is a very important game for these players. They want to win it. They want to beat Clemson. I think these guys have played very well all season long. Great rotation. And this front 7, Knight has been the best run defender. He's been great in coverage as well. Debo Williams is certainly a guy that struggles more in coverage. So that's maybe an area they can look to attack. Maffa, he can do some damage as a pass catcher. He's not great, but not too many weaknesses in this front 7. This is a group that's going to be great against the run, against this offensive line. They're going to look to cause communication issues. That's something you saw against Pittsburgh. They're hoping they've cleaned that up by now, but with so many moving pieces up front, especially in live game action, that was certainly a big issue for the Tigers. So, they will have a better understanding of their fate midweek, and I think they'll try their best to clean up those issues. But that's where South Carolina can really expose them. And Clemson, this is not a team that can really play in 3rd and long very often, really even 2nd and long. They can't do much on offense in those regards. And going up against a secondary that is also a phenomenal unit. DQ Smith, Nick Iwawarney, At safety, Ema Warney has been a phenomenal player in coverage. Both of them are pretty stout against the run. DQ Smith is more of a poor tackler than Nick is. These are two guys that have been in the program for a number of years now, though, and they certainly understand this scheme better than anybody. Jalen Kilgore has been a real breakout for them in the slot. You've seen that last year as well, and he really built off a strong season. So you got defensive backs that have all played together for a very long time. They don't have many issues. Very unlikely to have busts. And again, it's really just going to be coming down to one-on-one matchups, I think, for Clemson. You're going to see, the passing attack have those type of opportunities. Who's going to win those matchups? Is it going to be SC or is it going to be the Tigers? So far throughout the year, SC has done a great job winning those matchups. They've given up 285 yards passing twice this year, and that's the most. Not many teams have been able to complete many, passes with high efficiency. 57% this year. They've snagged 12 interceptions compared to 9 touchdowns as well. I think O'Donnell Fortune, this guy is a phenomenal player. He's really stepped up as a number one corner this year. You've seen it against Alabama, for example. That was a game he went completely off in multiple different regards. He's been a phenomenal coverage asset this year. Judge Collier, Bakari Swain, not as great, but I think they're adamant players, adequate run defenders, that is, and against a physical Phil Moffitt. You're certainly going to lay as many blows as you can. So elite South Carolina defense, there's not many flaws here, but I think South Carolina is going to have to, or Clemson, that is going to have to be incredibly physical against the run, and that's what they're going to look to do. Now you move to a Clemson defense. This is a unit that's been iffy themselves at times this year. 22 points per game. Certainly a lackluster number that we're accustomed to seeing from the Tigers. The run defense has, been strugglesome. They gave up 200 plus against Stanford earlier in the year to blow out Louisville. They had great abilities on the ground. Really couldn't stop them there. For the most part, though, over the last 2 months, they've been pretty good against the run, but Louisville was the best offense they faced, and they didn't do much. They held Desmond Reed in check. At least on the ground, through the air, he did pretty good. But this is a defensive line that certainly can bring a lot of heat to the table in their own right. You look at Peter Woods and TJ Parker. These are two guys who are phenomenal coming off the edge. These are going to be your top producers here. These two sophomores. These guys against these tackles are looking for opportunities to tee off, and I think they're certainly going to be there if the interior in this linebacking core can step up and slow down the run. I think they have enough athletic ability to slow down the QB run. Being caught out of position, though, is something that is possible. If Wade Woodhouse doesn't play, that means Sammy Brown's going to have to play even more reps, and the young 5-stars had his issues when he's been on the field the last couple of weeks, so they're hoping that Woodhouse can come back. One of the top tacklers on this team with 61 stops this season. On the interior, it's a group that's a little bit less notable compared to years past. Guys like Trey Williams, Steffi Island Green, whenever he's been on the field, Cade Denhoff, Jaheim Lawson, he's an edge player for them. So the interior doesn't bring much heat to the table as we're accustomed to seeing. DeMonte Capehart, that is. He's a very good player at 315 pounds, hasn't played in a couple of weeks, though. And he'll also be a game-time decision for this one. They're going to need as many bodies as possible to overwhelm this, average or below-average offensive line, I guess you could say. I think they have enough pieces here, though, to win those matchups and limit this ground attack. I think it's really going to come down to the linebacking group. Barrett Carter's the leader there. He's been phenomenal against the run this year. He's a great tackler. He's going to be the tone setter for this defense. And if Woodhouse comes back, it's going to be a very important, opportunity they have to slow down that, aforementioned QB run. They're going to bring a lot of physicality to the table. So I'm very confident in Clemson's ability to slow down this SC offense. I don't think they're going to be challenged too much through the air. I definitely think in the middle of the field there could be vulnerabilities. If Simon plays, dumping it off to the tight end, the running back, making plays underneath. Not so much out wide. I don't think they'll be tested in that regard. This is secondary, though. They had some issues against Pitt. They really couldn't get off the field. Gave up 63% comp on 54 attempts, 350 yards. Of course, Desmond Reed was having a big game as well, but they were just getting hammered in the middle of the field by receivers as well. 15, 20 yards downfield, wheel routes to Reed, those things. They're going to have to cover up. I don't think that, SC is certainly going to bring that type of game plan to the table, but those were the vulnerabilities that we saw a couple weeks ago. That's pretty much it for this second year. They haven't been too bad. R.J. Mickens, you want to monitor his availability. He's the kind of do-it-all safety for them. He was held out against Wofford as well. Phenomenal coverage player for them. I think he'll be good to go in this one. Kylan Griffin will have to step up in his absence. Khalil Barnes as well. Those guys have been, wishy-washy, I guess you could say. Younger cats that have been solid this year. Barnes, though, typically plays in the slot. Hasn't been too bad in coverage. but he'll certainly have to be strong in terms of defending the run and being in position. And then Avion Terrell at corner, I think he's a great player. Jaden Lucas, he's had his issues as well, but he's a willing run defender, plays with some nice physicality, a nice edge in coverage as well. Terrell is probably the best run defender on this team, at least in terms of people in the secondary, than Ashton Hampton if he has to get on the field. He's done well in coverage. So again, I don't think they're not going to be too worried about what's going to happen out wide, but in terms of being disciplined and being good against the run and tackling, those are things you got to look for with this secondary. And again, not getting burned underneath in the middle of the field, that's going to be the biggest issue for the Tigers secondary. Looking at the tail of the tape, team comparisons. I give Clemson most of the edges here on offense. I think it's certainly a better receiving group. At running back, it's really Raheem Sanders versus Phil Maffa. Both of them are great. Can maybe even call that one even. I'll go ahead and give Tigers the edge, though. I think Haynes will probably be more of a great number 2 compared to Oscar Attaway. Well, at quarterback, I think Cleve Klubnik gets the nod there. Even on the offensive line, I know SC's has drastically underperformed compared to the Tigers one, but they're still in flux of all the injuries they have, and even when they're fully healthy, they're certainly not the greatest unit. And then on defense, SC will get all the nods. Even though Clemson's not far behind, they have a great D-line. Go to linebacker. Go to the secondary as well. I think the Gamecocks over 13 weeks have earned the respect in those categories. Looking at the final thoughts and the prediction, for SC, overline that Tigers' shaky offensive line attack the middle of the field. Some of the key points already hammered on. And for Clemson, find ways to establish long drives and contain the QB run. I think we have to establish long drives because it's going to allow this defensive line to, be, taken out of this ball game. That's really what you got to do. And that's how you can beat South Carolina. If you can neutralize them, it's really because you're winning the battle up front. And, that's how you're going to beat SC. So if you can slow down their pass rush, force them to, rotate, I think that's going to be a big key for you there. And then contain the quarterback run. You've seen teams have a lot of success against South Carolina this year when they're able to contain Lenora Sellers' legs and even Sanders when he gets to the boundary. You don't want to be chasing these guys left or right because that's already a lot of size they're bringing to the table. So if they're picking up 8-9 yards and they're finishing the runs hard, it's just going to wear your own defense down. I'm going to take Clemson in this game. I have over 9.5 wins. Bet that I placed in the preseason, so there's no way I'm going to pick them to lose this game. It just definitely seems like it's going to be a hard one for the Tigers to win, though, because they're just an incredibly shaky team. When they've played tougher competition, they've not been all that great. The O-line got absolutely gashed against Pittsburgh, and I think they'll do a much better job here, even if they're not fully healthy. But this is a phenomenal D-line they bring to the table. South Carolina, they play more mistake-free football. They're very sound in special teams, of course. Their offensive unit has found